Okay, let's talk about Chapter 16, End of Life Issues. This starts on page 313 in your book. This is a great chapter that brings up a lot of ethical and somewhat controversial topics. So, the learning objectives are listed here on the PowerPoint and on page 313 in your book. Bear with me, let me flip over the page. Okay, so this is going to be one of those PowerPoints that confused me because this was not in the book, Dreams of Immorality. All right, so we're just going to let you read that. Let me know if you have any questions. Scope of ethical issues. Again, this is not following the book, but yes, there are definitely ethical issues regarding entire lifespan, right to be born, right to die, etc., and everything in between, like the PowerPoint says. Ethical dilemmas arise when values, rights, and duties and loyalties conflict. That this happens every day in healthcare at all sorts of levels and all sorts of realms. Every hospital, I can't speak to every healthcare facility, but every single hospital facility across this nation will have an ethics board. That is how weaved in and out ethical dilemmas come up in healthcare. All right, so now we're caught up to the chapter in the book. Page 314, Patient Autonomy and Case Law. You can read through this and just the self-determination and all sorts of information on page 315 and 316. And I just thought about it. So the immorality slide is discussed on page 314. It's just not highlighted as like a topic. So it is following along with the book. The PowerPoint does follow along with the book. Okay. The Quinlan Court relying on Roe versus Wade. So we talked about this, that this has now changed. Just, still read through the book, learn what it says, especially for the purposes of quizzes and tests and the final test. Even though Roe versus Wade has been overturned as of this year and changed in current times, you're going to be tested and quizzed on what your book states. The Cruzan case is also mentioned. Legislative response. So the Patient Self-Determination Act on page 317, this occurred in 1990. Requires health organizations to explain their patients' legal right to direct their own patient care. So what does this mean? This means that you and I have a right to say, hey, I want this and I don't want this. Or maybe that is okay, but this is not. And we get to pick this stuff. So when a person is no longer competent to exercise his or her right of self-determination, the right still exists, but the decision must be legally delegated to a surrogate decision maker. So this is where like the healthcare power of attorney comes into play, living wills, put it in writing what you want. If you are in a vegetative state with no chance for survival, do you want to stay on machines and suffer, or do you want them to cease all survival support systems and just let you pass peacefully? What do you want? While we're competent, we still have that decision making ability, but you have to put it in writing. Healthcare providers, including hospitals, nursing home, health agencies, health maintenance organizations, etc., hospice, they receive federal funds under Medicaid and Medicare and are required to comply with these type of legislative articles. Preservation of life with limits. Medical ethics do require that a patient's life be preserved at all costs in any circumstances. Keep flipping the page. In the book 318, euthanasia. Euthanasia is not the worst thing that could happen to a human or an animal. But that's not what this course is about. Euthanasia, it is I think it was Greek. It's a Greek word meaning good death or easy death. There's active euthanasia, there's passive euthanasia, and they're very different. Different ethical dilemmas come with each of them, even different laws surround each of them differently. Physician-assisted suicide. So this was popular. This became a hot topic back in late 80s and 90s. Dr. Kevorkian, he was a little ahead of his time. Many people view what he did as not wrong. He was just ahead of his time. And now Oregon, like 10 years after, 12 years after, 8 years after, whatever the math is, Dr. Kevorkian, Oregon, the state of Oregon actually passed a Death and Dignity Act allowing people to choose when they die, how they die, etc. You'll read in the chapter where it discusses suicide. And again, just so many ethical issues, lots of health law and policy regarding the topic of euthanasia. Advanced directives, this information starts on page 323 of the book. So much important information, and I believe I've said this before in my lectures. Anybody and everybody over the age of 18, I highly suggest going to your local bank or even a local hospital setting and ask. You can get these documents for free. Your bank may charge you a small little fee to make them specific to you and put your specific wishes in them. But yes, even at 18 years old, 18 to 118 years old, everybody should have these documents in place. Scan them, save them to an email, send them to your family members, put them in a vault at the bank or a fireproof safe in your home, share them with your doctor, share them with, seriously, it's not top secret, share them with people because you want to make your preferences known. A living will is an instrument, legal document that describes treatments that an individual wishes or may not wish to receive. The surrogate decision maker is the agent who you put in charge of making sure that your wishes do get followed through. Durable power of attorney is discussed on page 324 along with healthcare proxy. I'm talking too fast. I get passionate about this. But no, we really do need all this information. There are even websites now like rocketlawyer.com where you can do a free trial and download all these documents, cancel it within 7 days, but you get to keep your documents. Get this stuff in writing. It becomes a huge issue if someone does not have these documents, and let's just say it's an elderly man, and there are his family members are surrounding him in the bed at the hospital or even in hospice, and the wife says one thing, and then a daughter or a son or his brother or sister says, "Oh no, that's not what he said to me." Well, right then and there, if there is a conflict on what the patient wanted, we have to keep the patient alive. We have to intubate. We have to do some really hard things to keep this patient alive, and then it goes to court, and it's just challenging. Whereas if it is in writing, there is no dispute. This is what this person said, and this is what we will do. Guardianship is listed on page 327. Guardianship is mentioned here on the PowerPoint also. So futility of treatment, that is going to be the next slide, page 328. So this gets into medical care there's when continuing treatment would be of no benefit to the patient, whether it is harmful, whether that the end result is this person's going to be terminally ill, they're not coming back, there's not going to be quality of life, etc. Withholding and withdrawing of treatment is mentioned on 328 also. This is just some good information. This is some really good ethical stuff in this chapter. Morally, a physician has a duty to inform patient when there's little likelihood of success, and that includes the patient's family members. No, the providers do not lie about any of this. They have to be very forthcoming and have that ability to deliver bad news when it comes to this type of stuff, especially with end of life. Page 330. Let me get caught up here. Withholding and withdrawing treatment, part 2, when a patient's terminal condition and there's reasonable expectation of imminent death. Yes. So the key thing here, let me back up a little bit. Page 328, withholding and withdrawal of treatment. There's 3 bullet points on the right-hand column of that page. So withholding or withdrawing treatment should be considered when the patient's a terminal condition and reasonable expectation of imminent death is coming. The patient is non-cognitive state with no reasonable possibility of regaining cognitive function, meaning they are brain dead. And the third is restoration of cardiac function would only last for a brief period if you took them off the machines that are keeping them alive. This is when we consider highly to withdraw and withhold any treatments. These are the main conditions. DNR orders, this is another very important and very can be controversial. So a DNR is do not resuscitate. The type of patients that have these are people who have done cancer treatments, they've beat the cancer 4 or 5 times, it's come back for a sixth or seventh time, and the person's like, no, like I'll fight it, but if I pass naturally, do not resuscitate me. And that could be for religious reasons, that could be for financial reasons, honestly. It could be just sheer exhaustion. The patient does not want to do this anymore, and they have that right to claim that. That's just one example. Be sure and read that section in the book. Let's see what the next slide says. Ethics committee. I talked about that. Their function, yes, political advocacy, consultative role, education role, policies and procedures. Then we go to autopsies. Autopsies are page 330, 331. Postmortem, it determines cause of death. Um, Many people culturally and spiritually, religiously, refuse autopsies. There are certain criteria, like, homicides and different things that you have, like by the law says you have to. Um, and consent is required. If they have to, they can get a court order to do an autopsy. There's a lot of information there. You try to contact next of kin, so good information on that. 331, organ donation, federal regulations. And I will tell you, as a hospital employee for almost 25 years, um, I am, I can say this, I am an organ donor. I am a proponent of organ donation. But there are many religious beliefs, there are many even just personal beliefs that, this may happen or that might happen or et cetera. So I highly encourage you to look at organ donation and consider becoming one. If I were to be in a traumatic accident, it brings me peace, that knowing that if something awful like that would happen, that I can make the difference in up to 15, 16 other people's lives, because I am still young and healthy. Okay, but moving on. Organ donations. There are thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are on a list waiting for organ donation. They may or may not receive it before they pass. You have to qualify for organ donation. There is a hierarchy, and there are ways to move up on the list in regards to your health. So, if I'm 30 years old, I need a heart transplant, but I'm cruising along, I'm doing okay, and I think my prognosis is I'll be okay for the next 5 or 6 years. I'm not going to be at the top of that transplant list. But if I suddenly develop congestive heart failure and I need a heart within a couple weeks, then I get moved up. So it's not about money, it's not about insurance, it's not about the ability to pay, etc. Well, it is a little bit depending on the hospital. But anyway, that's how the organ procurement or donation list um, is prioritized. Now, with that being said, as a hospital employee and very knowledgeable of organ donation, I cannot, by law, I don't know if it mentions this in the book actually, but I cannot mention organ donation to family. As a nurse, I have to contact the organ donation team. They come in and speak to the family member about organ donation, if the patient was an organ donor, if not, etc. Okay. Who lives, who dies, who decides? I have a check mark beside that paragraph. That was a very good paragraph there on page 332. Keep reading. Brain death is mentioned there. That gives you defining death is on page 332, and brain death criteria. That is a real thing, and we still use that to make decisions today. Research and clinical trials. Ooh, there is so much I have to say about this, and I will compare it to real life. So you'll read page 334, 335, and it makes you feel all good inside that it's so regulated, and then bam, here comes the pandemic. And last year we were all in healthcare, we were all required to get a vaccine that had not gone through the classic clinical trials. So I'll leave you with that and let you filter that and see how you feel about all that information. Clinical trials typically do their due diligence and they're excellent, and it really does give patients the opportunity to weigh the benefits of a medicine or vaccine. We all have a duty to warn you. You have to be informed, highly informed, in research, clinical trials, etc. The FDA is all over this stuff, and the FDA was also very involved in the pandemic. Patient understanding the risk on page 337. Most people understand the risk associated with clinical trials, yet they're willing to take those risks so that those who follow with similar illnesses may benefit from their sacrifice. So that was pretty much, let me go back up a little bit, where many of us stood with the whole COVID vaccine last year. Or gosh, was it 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago. That time flew by. But anyway, many healthcare people got the vaccine without the clinical trials being completed, without FDA approval, with risk, because what we were seeing in the hospitals and the ICUs and the young people dying, the risk of a vaccine surely outweighed that. Um, so yeah, I'll leave it at that. All right. Sometimes I wish I could teach this class face to face because there's so much more we could dive in and talk about and really speak ethically about ethics and healthcare. But with this being an online class, you can't see my face, you can't see my emotion, my passion. You can't. So I would never want to unintentionally offend anyone. I would never want to unintentionally share my biases, my stereotypes, my etc. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that. You read the chapter and you let me know if you have any questions. Human genetics is going to be the last component of this PowerPoint. Starts at the bottom of page 337. Human genetics, I actually took like a genetic class in middle school. It was so cool. It is the study of inheritance. Like, what do we get from our family members as far as DNA and genes? Uh, Ethical issues will continue to arise with genetics. Of course, they will. We can do so much more today than we could when I was in middle school. Middle school, I learned about eye color, hair color, and my goodness, now you can tell with DNA if I'm going to have breast cancer, if I'm going to have macular degeneration, or if I'm at risk for Alzheimer's. All sorts of stuff comes now with I didn't finish my sentence. All sorts of stuff comes with technology advances, but with those advances come ethical dilemmas, such as stem cell research. So genetic markers are genes or DNA sequences with a known location in a chromosome. They can be used and altered, and stem cell research is a fantastic thing, but it's almost scary in the sense of what can be altered and edited, if you will. Um, but that's okay. There's risks with that. There's ethics with that, and good stuff can come from that. So that's what I choose to believe in. I choose to follow the good stuff. When we finally know we are dying, all sentient beings are dying with us. We start to have a burning, almost heartbreaking sense of the fragility and preciousness of each moment, of each being, and from this can grow a deep, clear, limitless compassion for all beings. That's a great little quote and very true. Okay, after you review the chapter, listen to the lecture, let me know if you have any questions at all.